I know you get a lot of scripts, but what attracted you to Harry and Claire and Molly Moynahan?
Well, yeah, I get a lot of scripts. I get more scripts than an independent filmmaker like me might be expected to get. Well, here's the thing. I was attracted to Molly's novels. That was the first exposure I had to Molly as a writer. And I read her first novel, and it was great. It was very well received. It was very well reviewed in the New York Times. I liked it. I thought the use of language was great. I thought it was brave. I thought it seemed personal, without being precious. And there was a lot of candor to it. The use of language was beautiful, though, and there was a toughness to it as well as an elegance to it. So she didn't really submit the script first. I read her books and we started talking, and I was very complimentary. And we were on Facebook, and there was somebody who attacked one of her. I think it might have been. No, I don't think it was. It might have been that first book. They attacked it. Just an arbitrary kind of attack. One of those things that people on Facebook sometimes choose to do, just to knock somebody down so that they can lift themselves up. It never works. And I was really offended by that. And I, as I sometimes do, sort of stood up for Molly. Not that she needed anyone to defend her, but I took this guy to task. So I was already in kind of a mindset with her that I liked her work, and that I thought that she was a notable and important writer. Then she told me that she had this script, that she'd been trying to write a screenplay and she'd been having difficulty, and it had been taking a long time. So I said, well, why don't you just send it along? Send it along in a hard copy form, because I hate reading things on monitors, especially, writing, screenplays, books. So she sent it to me, and I read it, and there were really good characters. There was exceptionally good dialogue in it. And the one issue that I had, and I told her right up front, was that it wasn't visual. And a screenplay needs to be visual. And that seems obvious, but the trick is that the story needs to be told in visual terms. Show, don't tell. And dialogue is all about telling. And dialogue is important, but the storytelling can't be done exclusively through dialogue. And that's pretty much how the script functioned. But she had beautiful characters. She had a very compelling story. And so I said, yeah, I know I can be helpful to you. What do you want to do? She said, well, we worked it out. And eventually I said, well, all right, here's what. I'll do a whole draft of this for you, but then I get to produce and direct it. And she liked the way that sounded. And so I did. It took me about a year, though, before I turned the first draft over to her, because I was really busy with another film called Road Rage. So that's how it happened. She's a real writer, and real writers can't always or don't always necessarily have an instinctive feel for screenwriting. And she didn't at the time, but I think she's getting a sense of it now. So that's how it happened.
You mentioned Road Rage. How does Harry and Claire compare or contrast to your two other feature films, Road Rage and The Watermelon?
Well, Road Rage was a completely different kind of project. It was conceived of as a piece of guerrilla filmmaking, and it was conceived of as a collaborative effort between myself and somebody with whom I am no longer friendly. I'm not entirely sure that Road Rage had to do with that falling out, but it was ultimately the instrument of the fallout. So Road Rage was sort of conceived of as a real kind of shoot from the hip piece of guerrilla filmmaking, very kinetic. I really wanted it to be aggressively cinematic. I mean, aggressive editing, aggressive shooting. I wanted it to be completely different from what The Watermelon had been, and it was. Um, the watermelon, well, it does. Harry and Claire does relate to watermelon in the sense that it's almost a sequel, except that there are different characters, or a continuation of the themes of the watermelon. Now, the watermelon was the first film and the only film I've ever done where my late wife, Lorenda, was the sole producer. It was her project. And that was a film about healing, about birds with broken wings, and how sometimes people can come together in love and trust and heal themselves. Lori was a very gentle soul, and she could go dark, in artistic projects. But where she lived and breathed, I think, was with kindness and gentleness. So there was a whole aesthetic to the watermelon. Since I was working on her project as a director, a project that had been written by another writer, I felt that I owed it to Laurie to honor her aesthetic for this piece. And I found myself making choices that I thought were really a bit more lyrical than I might have made working for another producer. And the piece was like a real fairy tale, an adult fairy tale. And there is it looks like a fairy tale, really rich, almost oversaturated colors. I mean, and Harry and Claire is like that in the sense that, these are two people, two artists, a musician, Harry, and a painter, Claire, young, in the 80s, it takes place in the 80s, living in Chicago, and they're both alcoholics, and they both have serious issues which have triggered the alcoholism. Molly very wisely wrote it with the sense that they were self-medicating. It wasn't just arbitrary drunkenness. It's a very carefully wrought piece of narrative and drama, and so there is that sense of coming together with some sense of desperation, some sense of need. However badly it may be articulated, they're drawn together, and the challenge now is to heal each other and themselves through the relationship, through their love. And there are a lot of challenges. There are a lot of demons, that have to be overcome. So yeah, I think it's that sense of love can heal. The trust can heal.
Is there an element to this piece that makes it personal to you as a filmmaker and a storyteller?
Well, yeah, it's just it's just what I said. But yeah, yes. The sense of it being about artists is really where it becomes very personal for me. I mean, all the other stuff that I just said, and the fact that it's almost a continuation of the film I made with Laurie. But yeah, on top of all these other issues they have, they're artists. And like I said, Harry he's a musician. He makes his living playing this gig at this bar. Of course, the bar enables him to, feed that demon, his alcoholism. He's in a bar. He's playing, in a German pub, playing kind of oompa music for the crowds. And yet in his soul, he's a composer, and he's fighting his own demons. And then Claire is this extraordinarily gifted artist who was born into serious money, so she doesn't really have to worry about sustaining herself. And she's free financially and in terms of time and so on and so forth to just do to inflict a lot of damage on herself. So they are artists. Now, when you're an artist and when you're a young artist and you're trying to create and define yourself, the world chips away at you. Life becomes a very cruel proposition. You know, in some ways, the more serious and talented you are, the more the world can chip away at you. It's death by 1,000 tiny cuts. And if you're already fragile, if you're already broken, well, then it can be almost unendurable. So, you know, how does one overcome that level of aridity and disillusionment? A phrase I am deliberately stealing from Michael O'Donoghue. I steal from the best. Aridity and disillusionment. Yes, you're an artist, and you have to feed, you know, yourself. You have to feed your soul. Life can be a soul-crushing proposition. So how do you overcome that? And Claire can no longer overcome that. She has stopped painting. She's even taken a knife and slashed one of her best paintings. And Harry, well, you know, he's not composing any music. He's sort of an automaton. He's a jukebox, a living jukebox for songs that really have no purpose in our culture, but serve a purpose at this German pub. So that's kind of a living death. So perhaps when they come together, they can rejuvenate one another as artists. They can become one another's muse. I am blessed in that I have a muse now. I'm involved in a relationship now that is profound and loving and deeply gratifying, and I understand that rejuvenation. So it could just be that the universe is providing me with this story at a point where I understand that I understand how, as an artist, I can be reborn. I hadn't really thought of that until this moment.
As a storyteller, what did you specifically bring to the script?
Well, as a storyteller, I didn't really bring... Well, I'd say perhaps I brought a few beats to it. I won't say anything more than that. You know, a beat is a moment where the action in a story shifts from one direction to another direction. Sometimes there are huge beats, and we call those plot points. The end of Act 1 and the beginning of Act 2 is usually a huge beat, where the whole story goes into a whole new direction, and the same thing with the end of Act 2 and Act 3. And this, having said that, that's basically what I brought to this piece, as a sense of the understanding of dramatic structure. The script as it had been delivered to me, like I said, was mainly talk, almost no visualization. And it wasn't structured the way a screenplay needs to be structured. So I really kind of compressed it. I made sure that in the places where there needed to be a huge shift of action, that action was there and that it was clear and that it was big, because it has to be. Like I said, I've brought a few flourishes to it, a few beats, but the story is hers. The character, Molly's. The characters are all Molly's, and Molly is completely in charge of the dialogue. So I always defer to her, especially the voice of the woman, the characters, female characters. So I didn't really bring anything new or special or unique. I brought a sense of how screenplays need to be written and how they need to function in order to be filmable. That's what I brought. When I was living in Hollywood, I made a living writing screenplays and treatments and doctoring other people's scripts. I was good at it. But Molly, like I said, is a real writer, and novels and just about anything that she touches is always... She's pathologically incapable of writing an uninteresting sentence. That's the thing with Molly. I am very capable of writing banality. So screenplays aren't necessarily the most expressive means of writing, or the most expressive format for writing. It's the visualization. A screenplay is a blueprint for a movie. So that's what I provided, basically.